Evelyn, I know that you guys wanted to talk about volatility just for a little bit here.
Right, yeah, so on a day like today when all of this is happening, it's nice to kind of step back and switch from the micro to the macro, right? And so, Andy, I'm really wondering what you're seeing from your LikeFolio data as far as the fear index.
Yeah, so LikeFolio, what we're doing here is looking at, we call it our fear index, and this is actually looking at investor talk on social media and how often the investors are using words that indicate a certain level of fear, whether that's hit a top, selling off, nearing a bottom, all those kinds of just really negative words in conjunction with broad market ETFs. And you can see over time, pretty spiky. We had some really big spikes at the end of last year as markets really sold off a lot. But what we're seeing right now is actually right up there with the highs in terms of the fear index that we've seen over the past year. And so a lot of times these can be very good contrarian indicators, a lot like the VIX in a way. And you can see, on the right of this chart, that's a really big spike for the LikeFolio fear index. It tells us that there is quite a bit of fear in this market, especially among individual retail type of investors. And for us historically, that's been a pretty decent contrarian indicator on the short term.
Andy, we have the VIX, we have the put call ratios, we have so many things that you measure to figure out the contrarian look at the market, right? When these things that's when traders start to think, all right, this is getting overdone. So does your fear index, which I think you're exactly right, when it gets to a certain level, then the contrarian view has to start kicking in. Do you see correlations between yours and put call ratios and VIX? Because right now the VIX, we're kind of surprised it hasn't participated like we thought it would, certainly.
Yeah, so the way that we've looked at this data and the statistical analysis of it is, essentially that our fear index tends to lead the VIX just by a very small amount. Like we're talking about less than a trading day, so half a trading day, something like that. So perhaps we've got a little bit more upside in the VIX to come. But more importantly, I think for investors, is when we see these spikes, we're generally within a day or two of a near-term bottom. I'm not talking about long-term type of activity. This is a view on a 2 to 5 day basis. Historically, we have seen a pretty high percentage of the time when our LikeFolio fear index gets to these levels that you see a near-term reversal in the next 12 to 24 trading hours.
And then real quick, Andy, just to clarify, when you're saying reversal, you're not talking about a sell-off necessarily in this fear index or VIX, but rather a recovery in the overall stock market, correct?
Yeah, you can kind of think of this as, this is an indication when investors are just kind of throwing in the towel and maybe have had enough, and most of the sellers are probably out of the market at this point.
Good stuff. But as Evelyn mentioned earlier, we're shifting from the micro to the macro, but let's kind of shift back to the micro for just a moment here. As we got Lyft after the close today and we got Uber tomorrow, you wanted to talk a little bit about the comparison of the two companies, and I don't think you could talk about one without the other, so I like that you wanted to talk that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've got two different trajectories for very similar companies, and this is Lyft, so you can see year over year, Q2 of 2018 versus what they're going to report. I think it's tonight. A significant drop in purchase intent mentions, and this is people actually talking about getting a ride or they're riding in a Lyft car. So we see, what once was an unbelievable trajectory for the company really starting to hit some turbulence, and I think this could be a tough one. And then when we compare that to Uber, we get actually just the opposite story. And if we put up the purchase intent mentions chart of Uber, those same two squares are highlighted, and they're going in exactly the opposite direction, where we're seeing year over year actual growth for purchase intent mentions in Uber, whereas it's falling for Lyft. And a lot of that, an enormous percentage of that, is attributable to the Uber Eats portion of their business, which has given them new life in terms of growth. They're not just relying on ride sharing anymore.
I think that's an interesting, everyone thought that Lyft would be that little company that would continue to gain on Uber and gain market share and eat away at them. And it looks like the bigger company, the bigger footprint is just stomping on Lyft. And especially when they were, even though they're a big company, they were lean and agile enough to get into the food delivery business as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're really starting to dive into this data and getting some really cool looks at this, where you can start to see Uber as the next generation kind of UPS or FedEx. If you want to think of it as a local logistics company, they're really changing the world. Whereas Lyft is still focused on ride sharing and, you know, getting people from point A to point B, Uber's really growing its network and its technology to be a company that can get anything from point A to point B locally. And I think that's going to be a very, very big competitive advantage for them going forward.
I'll ask you for some theory here, Andy. When we talk about delivery of product, you know, the big thing is they talk about the last mile, right? From someone, the last delivery point to someone's house. Is that, do you think, where Uber could really sustain itself and enter that delivery market?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're already proving it with the food category. I mean, you know, food has to be there relatively quickly. You have to do that right, because otherwise it's not good when it gets there. So just normal products are extremely easy once you've nailed food. And so I think Uber has this, you know, again, I'm just going to call it like a local logistics company. They have this pathway to really kind of an all-encompassing delivery service. You can just imagine what would happen. The way that they rolled out Uber Eats and, you know, kind of shut down or competed very well with Grubhub, DoorDash, all of those players very quickly. Think about the other industries that they could do that in. You know, I think about flower delivery, and there's these 1-800-Flowers and ProFlowers and all these companies that have, you know, built out all this great stuff just to deliver flowers. And if Uber decided we're a flower delivery company, we're going to add that to our app, they'd be one of the leaders within months. I mean, that's how powerful their platform is and their technology.
Uber definitely has a lot more going on compared to its competitor Lyft. And I do have this one tweet from the rideshare dude. Fitting, right?
Rideshare dude.
The Uber versus Lyft race to the bottom claims its first victim as Lyft goes into crash and burn mode. Turns out when the free rides go away, they discovered passengers' only loyalty is to low prices. And this definitely speaks more to the rideshare component of both companies, but I think he's exactly right. People are on the hunt for the lowest price, not necessarily loyal to one company or the other.
No, and I would say one more thing too, adding on that, which one can get you there quicker? Which one's going to be closer in terms of the amount of drivers they have? But one question I have for you, Andy, is when you're looking at this, how much is the Uber growth maybe attributable also to their Uber rewards and the discounts they give to buying Uber Cash ahead of time? If you're a frequent rider, you have advantages now to kind of pick one of these as opposed to the other.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that goes right with Evelyn's point, and it's a very good one, and that is, most of the time people are just clicking on both apps, which one can get here quicker and which one's cheaper. Normally they're very competitive with each other, and so you're just kind of picking one or the other. And so what Uber's rolling out with the rewards program, and again, it's just Uber dominating from a technology perspective, and that is, you know, now you have a reason, if it's close in terms of time, if it's close in terms of price, you're going to go with the one that gives you the loyalty rewards that you've already paid for, those types of things. So I think that's a very important point. And again, another segment of, you know, marketing and customer acquisition and retention where Uber is just beating Lyft.
Can you imagine a day, Alex, when a car pulls up to your apartment and goes, Alex, I've got your paper towels from Amazon, I've got your burrito bowl from Chipotle, and here's your mother-in-law from the airport.
No, like seriously, it feels like that's where we're going here. But Andy, if we kind of take this to a trading conversation real quick here, the data we can't argue with. I mean, it shows a downtrend in one company and an uptrend in the other. But you've mentioned before that you like to wait a little while for these companies to establish trading ranges, get some examples in terms of stock price data before you make a call. But with Lyft and Uber being a little bit more matured companies when they came to marketplace, does that impact that at all, or are you still kind of a wait and see for at least another couple months?
No, you're right. They are more mature companies, and they have somewhat of a price history in the private markets, which is a little bit difficult to access, but it can be done. And so the way I think about it with Uber and Lyft, more from a investment standpoint, would be, who's going to be the winner, and do you believe that this company could possibly change the world? And could it be a mega trend type of company that actually changes the world, creates its own wave, and rides it for 10, 20 years? If you're trying to pick that, I think you're going to pick Uber. If you're trying to pick which one may be too oversold or priced, that's a different story. I'm not ready to go there yet on either of these companies. I can just tell you that from our data, it's very clear that Uber is starting to create a major divergence versus Lyft in terms of which one's performing well. It's extremely clear.